Before I start talking, I gotta make coffee. Sorry. Just wait. It's like a nice day in Shanghai. Let's see what's going on here. Looking out the window. Doesn't feel too hot yet. It'll get hot. So I sit here every morning looking out over Shanghai, and I drink my coffee out of my fancy coffee mug. Ooh, hot and dark, just like I like it. All right, so I think any good morning routine starts with coffee. That is my personal opinion. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a health guru. I'm not a fitness influencer, as you can tell. But that's how I have to start. I cannot do anything. I cannot think. I cannot have any sort of life epiphanies in the quiet solitude of the morning without my coffee. And I do recommend that you have a kick-ass coffee cup. So I have many coffee cups in the house. Too many. I only use this one. And this one is a bone china from Wedgwood. And I don't know why I bought this. It's one of one in my house. I don't have a set. If people came over for a tea party, I would have the fancy mug, and they would have, a collection of chipped Starbucks mugs. But I don't know. I really like this. And if you're gonna buy bone china, which is like the most durable, because they mix the porcelain, I think, with bone chips, typically beef bone, and that makes it really hard to chip, hard to break, really. Anyhow, they last forever. But I would recommend the Wedgwood Company because the founder, Wedgwood, I don't remember his first name, he was one of the first abolitionists in the UK, in England. So he was one of the first people to throw his reputation and money behind ending slavery in the United Kingdom. So it's pretty cool. If you're going to buy from a company that's been around since 1759, you might as well throw your weight behind someone who's doing good and is on the right side of history, because so many people nowadays are on the wrong side of history. So anyways, cheers to that. So I turned 52 last week, and this is not a birthday video, but it is a reflection on aging. It is a meditation on what it feels like to be 52, well into middle age, and still not really having things figured out. And this is something that I want to be transparent and I guess vulnerable in a sense with everyone, because I think a lot of us are going through this stuff right now, and I'm going through it at 52, but perhaps you feel it as well at 32 or 22. Not that I have 22-year-old viewers, but obviously this is coming from the perspective of someone in the last half of their life, deeply into middle age at this point, and really just looking out and thinking, man, I really don't have it figured out like I thought I would. And how do we come to grips with that? How do we navigate that reality of at least my expectations were when I was younger, is that by this time I would have felt more. I guess I would have felt. I guess I was expecting to feel a greater sense of mastery over my life, over my decisions, over my self discipline, over my accomplishments, over the trajectory of my life. And it's just simply not the case. And maybe that's by design. Maybe that is life. Maybe that is the way it goes for most of us. Maybe because the more people I talk to about these things, the more people are feeling the same way. It's this sense of just really being lost. Like, I have a career, I have a family, I have a nice place, I have a bunch of books behind me, I have hobbies, is my point. And yet, I still feel there's something major missing. When I've shared this with other people, they of course always point me into the direction of religion, and maybe I'm not necessarily a religious person, but I don't close my mind off to that either. But I think it's something else. And that's what I'm going to want to discuss in the video today, is this sense of lack, this missing piece in our lives, in this modern day life, that I think more and more of us are feeling. And look, I don't want to be morose. I don't want people to think that I have a bad life, or that I'm depressed or anything like that. Possibly I'm a bit depressed. I think we all probably are on a spectrum of, being completely fulfilled with life and, suicidally disappointed in life. So I think some of us can move across that spectrum depending on what's going on. But over the last few years, I have certainly been more melancholy than maybe I have been in the past, although I've always tended toward this, especially around my birthday time. If you ask my wife, she will definitely tell you that I tend to get more introspective during birthdays, and maybe that's natural. It probably is natural to take a stock of your life and kind of look back over the year and see, did I accomplish my goals? How do I feel about myself? Do I feel like I'm moving in the right direction? Am I living according to my values? And for me, the more time that goes on, the older I get, I I realized I don't know anything. And it's almost like the more I read and the more I learn, all these books behind me that I dive into deeply every day, every week, the more I learn, the less I realize that I actually know. And some of that, a piece of that realization is liberating. But it's also terrifying because I just thought I would have more figured out by now. My kids come to me and they ask me for advice, and sure, I can give them surface level advice, mostly based on mistakes that I made or experiences that I had that I can reflect back on and then share wisdom in air quotes and scare quotes, right? I don't know how wise it is. I like to think I have a few things figured out, but I feel like once I check off a box of an unknown, right? So I feel like I've crossed the threshold into some new understanding of a concept or a problem in my life, that three more pop up, and it's almost like running in sand, uphill in sand, right? You take 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I think today what I want to dive into is that is probably the natural way of the world. That is probably the way it's structured, especially if you keep an open mind and fight for the acquisition of wisdom and deeper knowing, as I try to. I have very few hardened opinions. Unless you're on my Instagram and you know which way I lean politically, then that is a fairly hardened position, at least now. And even with that, what's funny is, I'm not. a supporter of the current regime, the current cult, at all. At all. I'm not a supporter at all. But most people are shocked to learn that I'm actually a registered Republican, have been my entire life. It doesn't mean I vote that way. In fact, quite often I don't. But the fact is that I am somewhat politically fluid, or nowadays politically homeless, since there doesn't seem to be any sane choice, especially in U.S. politics. I'm from the U.S. If I know I have a fairly international audience, given that I live in Shanghai. But yeah, I'm a dumb American, and our political system is completely devoid of any semblance of sanity. So I am politically homeless at this point. My point is that I am a fairly open minded person. I've changed my political leanings, I've changed where I live, I've changed many things about my mindset, and yet I still feel like I'm searching. I still feel like I'm on a journey. And the longer that I walk this path, the longer I'm on this journey, what I realize is that I don't think there's a destination. Part of that is terrifying. I think that is part of what I'm feeling lately, is that I'm putting in all this work. I'm walking the path. I'm learning. I'm trying to get better. Every day I'm trying to get better. I make new mistakes, and I still haven't solved some old mistakes, a lot of old mistakes. But I don't know if there's a destination. So then people say, well, it's the journey, not the destination, right? That tired old quote. And yeah, sure, there's a lot to be said about that. Trying to remain in the moment, stay in the moment, learn what you can, enjoy the time that is now, me recording this video. I should just stay in the moment and just enjoy this moment, because it's the only thing that's actually happening, right? This is a lot of what is spoken about in philosophy, is that, you know, the past is done and the future hasn't happened yet, and you can't control the future. This is a lot of like Stoicism. I do a lot of reading on the Stoics, and control only what you can control. Don't worry about the rest, because you don't have control over it. You may not even have any influence over it. So to spend time worrying about it honestly doesn't make any sort of rational sense. Staying in the moment as much as possible, sticking to your task at hand, doing your work. I mean, there's a lot of wisdom in that. And that's what I've been trying to do more often. But it's really hard. It's really, really hard to not get caught up in the worries of the future, especially as our world gets more and more precarious. And look, I've got a good job. I work for a great company, Fortune 5 company. I don't talk about my work on social media, but I work for one of the biggest, best companies in the world, right? But here's what's crazy, okay? Again, I'm 52. I'm not exactly the future of the company. I'm not going to be CEO. No way. Not even close. I've probably started to approach my ceiling of potential and desire, quite honestly, to do more. Yes, there's probably one more level I would like to get to. But after that, I'm not sure I've got the desire. I'm not sure I've got the passion for that type of work as you go up. So I'm 52, and I'm also embracing the reality that I've probably topped out in my role. I've been in my role for many years. I've been with the company for almost 15 at this point. And, when you've been in the same position for a while, as many of you probably know this, in the same company for a while, you start to get very small pay increases. Because typically most modern companies, they will have, pay ranges, right? So each position has a minimum, a mid, and a maximum. And I got to think I'm pushing the maximum at this point for my role. And once you get, you start pushing that ceiling of the maximum that they want to pay for that role, then your increases, your pay increases get less and less year over year. But what's crazy? And I sat down yesterday and I made a spreadsheet and I looked at my take home, pay, right? So after taxes, after medical, pay and everything. I made a spreadsheet from this year and then last year. And I've actually taken home. So last year I got a 3% raise, right? Because again, I told you these small raises. So I got a 3% raise. So I'm making more money this year, but I'm taking home, as of right now. So I'm filming in for first week of August of 2025. I have taken home. Let's just round up 3,000 less US dollars, even though I get paid in RMB. I just convert it because I've lived most of my life in the US economy, so that's how I think is in dollars. 3,000 less dollars I've taken home because the increase in medical costs and in taxes. That's the treadmill, folks, to where you can get a pay raise. You can be at the top of your your profession, or at least top of the level that I'm at. And you're actually going to start making less money. You're going to start taking home less money. And look, I live way better than most. I'm on the 38th floor of a beautiful building here in downtown Shanghai, overlooking a really cool neighborhood with amazing restaurants right downstairs. Look, I have nothing to complain about. Absolutely nothing. Most people live on a fraction of what I make. I'm not rich. I'm not a millionaire, but I'm comfortable. Okay. The only reason I bring this up is to just show that unless you're part of that 1%, we're all being affected by the societal breakdown that we're seeing, where the gap between rich and poor is just expanding. And I don't think it's ever going to get fixed, right? So I have over 30 years in my career, working in my career, 30 years of experience in my career, okay? Work for some of the biggest companies in the world in my chosen profession, and I'm making less money. I'm taking home less money year over year. And, that money buys less because prices are high. Look, everybody's going through it. I don't want to sit here and whine because, like I said, I'm way more comfortable than most people in the world. But I bring this up simply to underscore the point, guys, is that we have to find some meaning beyond our career, beyond this rat race, beyond chasing the next gadget or the next luxury item or the Labubu or the new Louis bag or whatever. We have to find some deeper meaning to this human existence than just the consumer rat race, the consumer death wheel, because ultimately it's empty. I collect books. Of my material items that I own, I feel at least there is some deeper value in owning and reading and cherishing books. That's probably a bias. There's other people, some of my family members, that maybe don't think that it's that valuable to have this many books. And look, at this stage, this is only one of my bookshelves, guys. I have one that's bigger than this, that's over here in the room over there. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other smaller bookshelves in the house. And I have probably 6 or 10 boxes full of books that I just can't put on display because I don't have the linear square footage of wall space to do it. So I have way too many books. I have more books than I'm ever probably going to read at this point because most of these I have not read. A lot of them I have quite. I mean, I read quite a few a year, so I read 50 to call it 65 books a year, depending on the year. This year I'm way behind, so I may not even hit 50, to be honest. But I have over 2,000 physical books in my house. That's not even counting my ebook collection and my various, Apple Books, Kindle, Kobo accounts. So I have plenty of reading material till the end of time. Does that stop me from buying books? No. No. But even with books is my point. There is this feeling of hoarding, of collecting, of consuming, of I got to get it or someone else will get it before me. I got to make sure that I buy that book so I don't forget about it. That's what I do. Is I'll hear about a book, I'll watch I'll listen to a podcast or watch a YouTube video, or quite often I'll be reading a book and it'll mention another book, and then I'm down the rabbit hole, and I don't want to forget. I don't want to forget that I want to read these books. And yes, I know I can make lists in Goodreads or make my own list in a notebook, but yeah, I don't know. I'm just not disciplined enough to do that. So I just buy the book and have it shipped to the house, which is stupid. Because then I don't usually get around to reading said book for years, if ever. Anyhow, my point, what I'm trying to drive in this video, and we're going to go for a walk later and talk some more and show you a little bit more of Shanghai and kind of maybe some of my daily routine. But the point I'm trying to drive home is that we have to figure out a way to squeeze more meaning from life in more virtuous ways, besides buying more stuff, besides climbing the corporate ladder, besides buying the boat or buying the jet skis. Sure, all those things are great, and there's nothing inherently wrong with any of that. But when it becomes your life's mission, when it becomes your guiding principles, when you sacrifice your health, your relationships, your own personal values to accumulate cheap shit, that's when it starts eating at your soul. And that is kind of where I found myself at 52, looking back on things. And yes, I'm very incredibly proud of being a father and a husband. And I think I do good work at my job. And I know I've made a difference in a lot of my employees that work for me's life. I know that I've affected them in a positive sense. But I can't deny that probably my biggest accomplishment is that I've been a really good little consumer. I've been a great little capitalist. I've been an amazing addict. So that's what we're going to try to break, guys. That's what I'm trying to break, is I'm trying to get off this hamster wheel of consumption, of valuing my life and my experiences by what I can accumulate. And to just see if there's any more out there. I'm 52. I don't have much time left. I'm in the last half of my life. Come on, let's go take a walk. So I've been reading this book by James Hillman, and it's called The Force of Character. And I read one of his other books last year. I think it's called The Soul's Code or something like that. But anyhow, this one, The Force of Character, it talks a lot about aging and what is our place in society, or even in our own life as an older person, as somebody who is, getting on in years. What is our responsibility? What is the value that we can add? And in Western society, it seems like a lot of that value is questionable for older people. We put people in old folks' homes. We don't spend as much time with them. There's a big debate with U.S. politics about, are you too old to be president? Which, at least in the two examples we've had over the last two administrations, yeah, I would agree with that. They're probably too old and senile to be president. But not everybody's like that, right? Not every person who ages has those same
maybe cognitive issues or whatever. Anyhow, the point of the book, though, is that what can we add as older people? What value do we bring? And what Hillman argues in the book is that this is the time in our life to build character, to build wisdom. So, as I mentioned earlier, yeah, I'm probably not going to be at the top of my career. Studies have shown that innovation and innovative ideas, while not absolute, but typically happen when you're younger. You don't see a whole lot of tech startups from 60, 70-year-olds, although it's happened, but it's exceedingly rare. But that doesn't mean we don't, those of us who are maybe in the last half of our life, that doesn't mean we don't have inherent values still to add to not only our own life, our family, but to society as a whole. So what Hillman argues in this book is this is the time of life to build character if you haven't already. Character and values are not something we talk a whole lot about in modern life anymore. But it was part of everyday life in antiquity, especially philosophers, writers, poets, playwrights, even some really great emperors talked a lot about values and character and what it means to be a man, what it means to be a valuable person to your society or to your clan or to your tribe. And that's something that I think we've completely missed out on. We've walked away from that. We've walked away from that in Western society. Sorry, I had to stop and get a water. So the question of value as we age is not as obvious as maybe we might think when we're thinking about it as a young person. So again, when I thought these thoughts, whenever I did, and I did think these thoughts, these projections into the future. When you're young, you all dream about what life's going to look like, or we worry about what life's going to look like. And this never crossed my mind. This never crossed my mind, this concept of what is our value. I just never thought that that would even be a question. Would I have value into middle age and you know, approaching old age? It's something I've been meditating on quite a bit. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I've been reading other books. So there's another great book called, I think it's called Walking with Epicurus. Daniel Klein, I believe his name is. And it's a short book, it's an easy read, but it's great. It's really great, I really loved it. And Klein is writing the book in his 70s. He's now in his 80s, he's still alive. Or at least his Wikipedia page said he was still alive. And the whole book is him going to a Greek island to explore what successful aging means. And he got curious about this because of the writings and the teachings from the Epicureans, the philosophers, during the time of the Stoics and the Cynics and the Epicureans, the Aristotelians. You know, there was quite a few schools of thought at the time. And Daniel Klein, in his book, Walking with Epicurus, really explores what it means to successfully age. While the books are similar in theme around aging, they take a related but slightly different approach to their overall thesis that they're trying to present. But if you are in middle age, or if you are approaching that time of life, if you're in your mid-40s, or like me, early 50s, or even later, I recommend both of these books because I think sometimes we can get caught up, or at least I can, with this creeping dread of impending death and irrelevance as a person or as a member of society, right? Nobody wants to sit around and listen to my old stories that I've probably told 10 or 12 times to my kids, and they just kind of politely roll their eyes when I tell it again. But what Hillman argues in his book is that's the value. That's actually the value of old people or people who have acquired a certain amount of wisdom, is to be the culture keepers of the society, is to be the storytellers. Obviously that doesn't mean a younger person can't tell great stories or can't acquire wisdom, but with 5 decades on this earth, making many, many mistakes and some successes, I've learned a few things. We've learned a few things, those of us who are in this stage of life. And sharing that is our responsibility to our society. And what he argues is that our work daily building character, living in accordance with values that we decide upon, being, I would say, hard on ourselves, easier on others, trying to live by some sort of a philosophy or a motto or a ideology. Philosophy is probably a more positive word, but this is our responsibility. This is how we add value. So that's what I've been trying to do, is build character. This track is near my home, and I try to come here as often as I can to walk and eventually run. As we age, that we tend to invest in and long for is this bittersweet feeling of nostalgia. And it's why I come to this track. I grew up running cross country and track in junior high and high school. And what's crazy is that I didn't love it, to be honest. My father kind of forced me into it, and I never deeply fell in love with it. There were certainly moments, especially when I just felt strong or fast, and I had some really great times, or we won, or I won a race or whatever. Like, obviously those moments were incredible, but overall I felt like I had to do it to please my father. But now, the crazy thing, the first time I came to this track a couple months back, I teared up. I was walking the track, and I mean, even now I can get a little emotional just thinking about it, is that walking this track, I felt alive again. I felt like a piece of my past had been yanked from that time and pulled into my future. Obviously, I'm not gonna run a 4:30 mile like I did in high school. Actually, I think I ran under a 4:30 mile, but I don't remember, but it was certainly around 4:30. Not the best runner on our team, but not too bad. I'm not gonna run my times 4:30 mile, 9:52 mile, that's not gonna happen. But just being here and being back in touch with this part of my life makes me appreciate where I am now. And that sounds strange because as I walk this track, I'm longing for a past. I'm longing for a feeling of strength and freedom and speed and youth that I just no longer have. But that longing, that bittersweet feeling, you can't get that in the moment. You can't get that in youth. That can only come with age. Only the appreciation comes with time. And I think that realization is a piece of what Hillman is asking us to consider, is to think about, is that while aging can be scary, it can be depressing, we are faced with losing many of the attributes that have defined our life up to this point. Again, like I've said, youth, speed, beauty, fitness, whatever, creativity, innovation. But it's only when you get to a point in the future, a further point in the future, can you actually appreciate the fact that you had those things. It is this perspective. It is this viewpoint from, the mountain or the hill of many decades that have passed that are in our rearview mirror. That's where we get the feeling of bittersweet. You can't be nostalgic for something that you're still in the middle of. And our work, my work, is to distill down what are the lessons I've learned? What are the things that I want to hold on to? What are the things that I want to make sure I can play my very small part in protecting for future generations? Obviously, I want to do my best to impart this knowledge to my girls, my daughters. So the good news is that if you're halfway through your life, like I am, more than halfway, this can end up being the best part of our life, because this is where we deepen everything. This is where we go deep. Okay, we've already looked around. The first 5 decades have been a big survey. Okay, I've just been looking around. I've been deciding, like, okay, what's right, what's wrong, what do I love doing, what do I hate doing, what are my successes, where are my failures, and now it's about let's deepen. Like, let's go deeper, see if we can master a few things. And I mentioned earlier about I thought that by now I would have mastered something, and perhaps you could argue that there are certain skills in my career that maybe I've mastered. I mean, I don't know, I never think of myself that way. I've been doing it, like I said, for 30 years, so sure, I'm probably better at certain things than maybe most people starting out, but that's not due to any sort of brilliance on my part, that's just doing the reps, right? But I think that's the argument, is that most of life is just doing the reps, right? It's walking the track, it's putting in the miles, it's doing the push-ups, it's doing the pull-ups. The routine, the reps, that's what builds character. As I said at the beginning of the video, I think a lot of people, even in my age, feel lost, feel untethered from meaning, from purpose, value, personal value. And one of the reasons I love reading literature, and especially lately, a lot of ancient literature. Well, let me back up. So this last couple months, really half a year, I've been reading a lot of Homer, the ancient Greeks, ancient Romans and Greeks, philosophers, poets, writers. And sure, they're famous, and you probably read it in high school or college, or if you haven't read it, you've at least probably seen some of the portrayals in popular media, like the movie Troy, right? Or Christopher Nolan is making The Odyssey right now, which I'm excited for, actually. There's a scene in the early part of The Odyssey. I can't remember what book it is. It's maybe book 2 or 3. Odysseus, famous king, warrior, fought with the Greeks against the Trojans in the Trojan War. He's mentioned quite often in the Iliad, the previous poem, or they think it's the previous poem. They don't really have proof that Homer wrote the Iliad first, but some pretty smart deductions, he probably wrote the Iliad first. If there was a he, that's a whole nother topic. Anyways, I won't get into that. There's a scene where Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, he's basically been missing for 20 years, okay? And he went to the war, they fought for 10 years, give or take, and then they finally defeat Troy, and then all of the troops, all the Greek troops head back to their lands, right? So Menelaus goes back to Sparta, and Agamemnon goes back to his spot. I don't remember what it's called. Nestor goes back to his spot, and Odysseus also leaves, okay? But he gets lost. The Odyssey tells the story of his, journey to try to get back home to Ithaca. But the part I'm talking about is while he's away, okay, his wife, obviously she's a queen, Penelope, beautiful, smart. She's often described as sensible, depends on the translations, but sensible, well-spoken, smart, basically. She's a queen, so she's rich, right? She owns all the land. So there are a bunch of local suitors who are trying to jockey for position to marry Penelope. She's obviously doesn't want to marry any of these dudes. She wants Odysseus, her husband, but he's been gone for like 20 years, okay? So she's been keeping these suitors at bay. She's been putting them off with various tactics that I won't get into. While these suitors wait, while all these guys seem to have nothing else to do, they just basically hang around Odysseus's castle, eating, partying, drinking, eating his goats, eating his pigs, eating his cattle, whatever. Basically squandering Odysseus's fortune, which back then was measured, of course, in gold, silver, bronze, stuff like that, but was also measured in livestock, wine, barley, and they're just eating it. They're just sitting around waiting for Penelope to make up her mind who she's gonna marry, and they're just getting fat and happy, okay? So Odysseus' son, Telemachus, he's 20, give or take, okay? Well, he's at least 20, because Odysseus has been gone for 20 years. And he's fed up with it. He's totally sick and tired of seeing these losers just eat his father's, well, really his estate at this point, right? Because he's going to inherit everything. He will be the king once Odysseus is proven, to be dead, unless his mom takes another husband. Sorry, so that was a big buildup, and I do have a point. The point is, in book 2 or 3, Telemachus, fed up, he calls a council of all of the kind of highest ranking men of Ithaca. Some of the suitors are also in this group, or at least they're in the audience. He makes this big impassioned speech and basically saying, I need help. I can't fight off these guys. I'm just a boy. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to fight. I don't know how to be a man. I don't know how to claim my legacy. I don't know how to claim my father's property with all of these older, stronger, more experienced warlords. Even though Telemachus isn't necessarily the focus of the Odyssey, it's obviously Odysseus, but Odysseus doesn't show up for several books. I don't think he shows up till book, don't quote me, but 6 or 7, something like that. It's mostly focused on Telemachus in the beginning and his journey and him trying to figure out what happened to my father. And throughout those books and throughout those scenes, some very poignant and melancholy, I don't know, it just tugs my heartstrings, and it really echoes with how I'm feeling, even as a 50-year-old, is that there was no father there to teach him how to do these things he's now struggling with, right? And yes, my father was there. My parents remained married until I was an adult, but in a lot of ways, my father was an absent father, like a lot of us are, because of this hyper capitalistic, this hyper work mode. He was always gone. He was always at work. For a long time when I was a kid, when I was younger, he was an airline pilot. So he was only home maybe 10 days a month, flying all over the world, right? Or all over the United States. And I don't blame him at all. I don't blame him. I blame the society that's allowing our fathers to neglect their sons. And I don't have a son, but it's more about, are we neglecting our societal sons? Are we neglecting our true place in building strong culture in our societies? And that's what Telemachus is fighting through, is that nobody showed him. Nobody was there. His dad was off at war. Sure, could be noble. If you've read it, probably not noble, to be honest. Fighting for Agamemnon and Menelaus, not the most upstanding dudes. Odysseus himself does some morally questionable things, not even questionable, morally repugnant things. So it's not about, if Odysseus was there to teach Telemachus that everything would be perfect and that Telemachus would be this great and noble person. Probably not, right? These guys were warriors, they were kings, they did terrible things to make sure that they stayed on top. But the lament and the pain and the melancholy, bittersweet feeling that Telemachus mentions, kind of, in the poem really resonates with me. And I found myself at 52 feeling like Telemachus some days. Like, what the hell to do? I've got this far, but yet I feel like I've got this far through improvisation, not through a plan, not through any sort of guidance from a deep set of values or morals or anything like that, or even any sort of like a mission. Odysseus had a mission. Telemachus had a mission. Menelaus, Agamemnon, they had missions. Now, we can argue with if those missions were right or wrong. That's really not the point I'm trying to make. But so many of us nowadays in modern society, we don't have a mission, especially I would argue men. And that sense of mission, that sense of being part of something larger than ourselves is missing. I argue it's missing, and I'm not the only one. And I feel this. I feel this is what's missing. Taking this even a little bit deeper now, especially for someone like myself who's an American, is that our national mythos, right? Our national myth is as if our country is perhaps that missing father figure. And what I mean by this is that as an American, especially growing up in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, like I did, it was very clear the American dream was still at least alive in rhetoric. Get a good job. Well, graduate from high school, get a college degree, get a good job, get a house, get married, have 2 kids. If you do those things, like, everything's good. Everything's taken care of. You'll be totally fine. You'll be more than fine, okay? You'll have the American dream. All right, well, I did that. I did all of those things. Literally checked off all the boxes. And I don't have the American dream. Now, again, as I said earlier, I'm not complaining because I'm fortunate in a lot of ways, and recognizing that I do come from a highly privileged starting place. White, male, American. Doesn't get more privileged than that unless you're royalty or a, Nepo baby. But the point still remains is that America, the idea of America, the way we were fed it as kids, in a sense, could take the place of a father figure. And most of that was driven by daddy capitalism. Daddy do more, daddy buy more, daddy gets bigger house, daddy gets jet skis, daddy gets tennis lessons for the kids, whatever, right? I think where we screwed up as a society in many ways, don't get me started, but one of the major ways is that we took the fathers out of the house, we sent them to work outside of the house. Their family would see them for a few hours at night, maybe 10, 20, 30 rushed crazy minutes in the morning when everybody's trying to get out of the house to get to work or school. And then if they're lucky, a handful of hours on the weekend, because weekends in America is a lot about chores, shopping, play dates, co-curricular sports. We sidelined our fathers, and especially in the 80s and 90s, increasingly our mothers, supplanted parenthood with nationhood and with consumer culture. That, and I would even argue celebrity culture. So we took away the real fathers and mothers, put them in factories, and I don't mean literal factories, because no, we offshored all those, right? We sent all those here to China. I just mean the factory of capitalism, the factory of consumer culture. We installed them there, took them away from their kids, took them away from their communities, made them so goddamn tired that they can't even freaking think at the end of the day. So what do they turn to? They turn to booze, they turn to drugs, they turn to cheap, disposable entertainment. Hopefully not like this video, but I'm self-aware enough to realize that this is part of the problem. You watching this video instead of going and spending time with your kids or your family. This American myth of the harder you work, the more you work, the better your life is gonna be. And I can tell you, as a 50-year-old American who's lived in 3 different countries now, I've lived out of the United States for 12 of my 52 years. I can tell you that's not it. That's not the dream. To just work harder and die with a bunch of cheap shit made in countries that we took advantage of for a long time. That's just not it, guys. That's not the meaning of life. And that's why I'm walking and talking. I'm gonna walk and talk my way to a better life. That's what I want to do in these videos, guys, is I want to start posting more often, and I just want to talk. And I just want to talk about things that are affecting not only me, but us as a society, as possibly you as someone in the middle of your life, struggling to figure out what to do next, what to do at all. Has it all been worth it? Is this meaningless? Do I have any value to still give? My feeling right now on this track where I'm trying to relive my glory days of high school, at least get that feeling, and God, just the smell of the all-weather rubber track brings back so many memories. Again, I get chills and I could break down in tears if you pushed me. The only thing missing is that this is artificial turf and my high school was real grass. Yes, we have value. Yes, we still can do something with our time. And I'm arguing today based on arguments from brighter, better, smarter people that I'm reading, is that this is the time to actually drive the most value. Maybe not shareholder value, maybe not stock value, but that's not what we're talking about. That's not the important thing. The important thing is societal value, is value to your family, is value to yourself. Can you wake up in the morning and look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm proud of this person. I'm proud of the person that I've become because I've struggled, because I've dedicated myself to learning, dedicated myself to knowledge, to being a good neighbor, to being a good spouse, to being a good parent, to being a good friend. Am I proud of myself? And sure, I think you can get glimpses of that when you're younger. There are moments where you can get that. You can't get it as deeply as when you're standing at 52 or 62 or 72 and you're looking back across your life. You're taking an inventory, you're taking stock of your decisions, of what you've done and what you've added, what you've subtracted, possibly the mistakes you've made, the pain that you've caused or that you've felt. But can you stand here right now with me and say, yeah, but you know what? It was worth it, and it's gonna get better. I'm gonna get better. I'm 52, I'm still gonna get better. I'm out here walking my ass off because I'm not my best self right now physically. Obviously, I will never be, like I said earlier in the video, that guy who can run the 4:30 mile, the 9:52 mile. That's not gonna be me. But maybe I can run this track again instead of just walk it soon. It's about building character. Our value now, as people in the last half of our life, is to build character, is to build wisdom, and to share it.
All right, guys, so I'm back from the walk, and I said I was going to get cleaned up, but yeah, I just want to finish up the video. And then I'll go take a shower and get on with my day. But I wanted to recommend some books. Some of them I already mentioned, but I'll show you what they look like in case you're searching for them, although I may have older versions. Most of these should be available as an ebook. I have physical books usually, although I do read quite a bit also of ebooks. But all right, so going to start kind of where most of the talk was focused, and that is the Odyssey here. So I like this translation, Emily Wilson. I think this is like one of the newer translations of the Odyssey that's out there. Super straightforward, very easy to follow, very clear. Not necessarily as kind of poetic as maybe some of the other translations that are out there, but if you've never read it before and you just kind of want to know like what's going on, who the people are, who the characters are, what are the main themes, I would start with the Emily Wilson because it's just written in such a modern and accessible way. And then if you wanted to get more flowery, more poetic, you could, you know, go to some of the other translators. So the Odyssey. And then also same, the Iliad. Same translator. Can you guys see that? Yeah. Can you guys see that? So the Iliad, a lot of the same characters, or Iliad was first. Odyssey talks about some of the main characters. So if you are just beginning with Homer, maybe start with the Iliad and then go into the Odyssey. I think the Odyssey is actually my favorite. I say that now, but I might go back and forth on that. It just depends probably what mood I'm in. The Iliad is a war story, and it's brutal and violent, and it's men at war. It's gods getting involved with the war. And then the Odyssey is really about coming home from war and dealing with the aftermath and the trauma of war. So to me, the Odyssey is more poignant, more emotional, but I don't know. I could probably change my mind, so we'll see. All right, next is Finding Meaning in the Second Half of Life by James Hollis. And this guy is a PhD psychologist or psychiatrist or something like that. I don't really remember, but really great practical ways of looking at the last half of your life. Talks a lot about, again, values and deepening and investing in the things that matter versus kind of what we talked about in this video is getting caught up in the frivolous stuff. You can see I've got quite a bit of things highlighted here. I haven't finished it, to be honest, but it's still sitting on my desk and I still page through it when I get a chance, but it is pretty good. Travels with Epicurus, I mentioned this. This is great. I just finished it last week. It's a slim book, a couple hundred pages. Yeah, like one. It's 150 pages. It's very quick, very short, very clear. I don't know. I love this book. I love the way he writes. And he has these little slices of life as he's walking across this Greek island and interacting with the locals and his reflections. And he just has a way of capturing like these slices of life that really resonate with some of the themes that he's talking about as far as aging and how to get, the most out of your life towards the end of it, and what to focus on, what not to focus on, what to let go, what to still invest in. And on top of that, it's kind of a cool travelogue of Greece, which I'm hoping to go to next year. All right, this is the one I probably talked about the most, The Force of Character by James Hillman. So yeah, this one is really great. It's not an easy read. I wouldn't say it's an easy read. It's more of a psychological text in a sense. I mean, it's not a textbook and it's not, like technical, right? So it's not for professional. It is written for the common person like me, but it is a little bit harder to grasp. You might have to set the book aside and really think about it or take some notes. Or I always outline my books. I always mark them up and come back to them later and make notes on 3x5 cards that I file, especially if I have really great quotes or something like that. But it's worth the time. It's worth the investment of time on this book. I'm really enjoying it. And like I said, his book, The Soul's Code, or The Code of the Soul, or something like that, the book that was previous to this, that was one of my favorite books of last year, even though this was written in, I want to say the 90s. Let me see. Yeah, 1999, and the Soul's Code, or the Code of the Soul, whatever it's called, that was written before that, so early 90s, mid 90s. All right, I always recommend Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. One of my favorite books, if not my favorite book. I try to read it every year. I've already read it once this year, and I'm already partway through the annotated version. This is the Gregory Hayes translation. I think, again, this is the most accessible. If you've never read Marcus Aurelius before, I would start with this translation. It's very clear. You totally understand what he's talking about. And what I love about this is, Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, some say the last good Roman emperor, and it's his diary. He never intended this to be published. These were his personal notes. This was his book that he talked to himself at night. And what I love about it is he's struggling with the same things that we all struggle with. The most powerful man in the world could have anything he wanted, and he still is questioning the things that we question. So for me, this was written 2,000 years ago. It makes me feel better about my struggles, or about some of the things that maybe I'm dealing with or trying to figure out, knowing that Marcus was also trying to figure these things out. Like I said, I read it once a year. I give this book as gifts to my employees, especially my leadership team. I think it's a great book on how to be a leader, how to be a man, how to be a great human, and again, transparent and vulnerable, like we should all aim to be. This was a Roman emperor, and seeing his thoughts and his feelings and what he struggled with. I think half of his kids died. I think he buried half of his kids, something like that, something terrible. So he had like 12 kids, and I think 6 died or something like that. Don't quote me on the number, but it was a lot. Anyhow, Meditations, Marcus Aurelius. It's a must read. All right, finally, we've got Iron John by Robert Bly. Now, we didn't talk about this one, and I meant to actually talk about it. It was kind of in my mental notes as I was walking the track. So we'll get into this book later because I do think this one is worth diving into, especially if you're a man, especially if you are maybe finding yourself late in life, maybe a little lost, maybe a little directionless, maybe a little surprised that you haven't got things figured out, like I've been mentioning in this book. Iron John is basically a fable, and Bly, who is a poet, who's a fantastic poet, by the way, and some of his, just going to YouTube and watch Robert Bly if you really want to kind of go down like the rabbit hole of philosophy, especially when it comes to like men's topics. And I don't mean like toxic masculinity. What's his name? Tate, that fool. What's his name? Anthony Tate, something like that. Anyways, total dipshit. I lump idiots like Jordan Peterson in the same boat. Sorry, I mean, I know some of you probably like Jordan Peterson. I think he's a fake intellect. I don't pick up anything that dude throws down. But Robert Bly, I don't know, he's just different. And I think it's because he's a poet. He's coming at the same types of topics, like what it means to be a man, what it means to struggle, what it means to be lost in our current society without any traditional training or rites of passage that men must go through, like what happened in ancient times. But he approaches it with the mind and the heart of a poet, and that's the difference between someone like Andrew Tate or Jordan Peterson or Joe Rogan or, you know, any of these types of like more bros that are out there that are trying to get into like the manoverse or whatever you want to call it. I reject most of what they are trying to sell, and let's be honest, they're trying to sell you something, typically a course or vitamins. I reject almost all of it. But Iron John, Robert Bly, and a few of these other authors, to me, this is where the real work of being a man is. It's in the mythopoetic. It's in being a kind and gentle warrior, not a misogynist. So anyhow, those are book recommendations. All right, guys, so I'm going to wrap this video. So this has been a walking, talking video. I'm going to do more of these. I don't know if you like them. I feel like we need to talk about these things. I feel like we need to bring these topics into our current milieu or zeitgeist or just everyday life and think about them and talk about what is going to be our legacy as middle-aged people. How are we going to direct the future? Are we going to allow these 1% maniacal billionaire fools to rule the rest of our life? Are we going to allow TikTok culture to completely dominate? Or can we push society forward? Can we push humanity forward through going, I feel, back to some of these ancient texts and studying the real mentors? Yeah, and that's actually how I want to wrap this up. I totally forgot. So I mentioned this on the walk, and so when I was walking laps, and I was talking about like the father figure, right? And I shared a little bit about, you know, my father, and I told you the story of Telemachus and Odysseus, and how then American culture kind of played the father figure in my upbringing in a sense. But I never finished my thought. I got distracted out there on the track. I was probably dying of heat. But the way I wanted to wrap up that thought was that is what I'm now searching for. I'm searching for a mentor. I'm searching for the voices of wisdom, and that's why I read so much. Now, if you don't have a mentor, I've never had a mentor. I've never had an older man, an older male, truly show me how to be a man, how to step into the world, how to, you know, build something that you're proud of. I've done this all. I shouldn't say I've done it all myself. No one does anything by themselves. But what I'm trying to say is, like, I've done a lot of my life through trial and error, and most of it's been error, and most of it's been really screwing up and doing stupid shit and regretting it, and then having to rebuild and hitting rock bottom and then having to pull yourself back up, right? And I know that that's valuable, and I know that that's all part of life. And even if you do have a mentor, they can't protect you from those things. But my point, that's what I'm searching for. That's what I'm trying to build. I'm trying to build my own mentor. And that's why I spend so much time with these books, is because these are the best minds that humanity has produced, at least in written form. You know, maybe there were smarter, better, more kind, more beautiful people, but unfortunately they didn't write. So I have to take what I can get. And I think that's why over the last 2 years I've been reading more old books, books that have stood the test of time. The reason we still read the Odyssey and the Iliad is because there's something fundamentally human there. The reason I'm reading Marcus Aurelius every single year is because there's something fundamentally human about it. It speaks to our soul. It speaks to the thing in here, inside of this bag of meat that we walk around in. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm trying to build. I'm trying to build my own tribe of mentors. I think that's a title of a book, actually. Anyways, but that's what I'm trying to build. So hopefully we can talk about that together. Not every video will be about this, but that's where my mind is currently. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. As always, please comment, please like, please subscribe, do all that stuff. I'd really appreciate it. I'm going to be making more videos. I say that every time I make a video, just so you know, so you probably can't trust me, but I don't know. Something is shifting in me. Something is changing. I feel like something's coming. I don't know what it is. I'm not clairvoyant. I'm not getting woo-woo. But my point is that I feel this next stage of life coming at me, you know, like a freight train. And I want to embrace it. I want to try to do it differently. I want to try to do the last half differently than I did the first half. Not that I regret the first half, but where I am now is not where I want to be. I'm not fully formed, and that's good news. So have a great day, guys. I will see you. I'm going to film another video tomorrow, so I'll see you tomorrow.